intangible part in this big machine, then suddenly all of those connections are broken. And what happens on a personal, psychological level is that you have an outbreak in society, and these are the problems of the modern age. You have what's called alienation. That is, people are alienated from society. They feel like they have no worth. They feel like they have no home. They feel like they belong no place. They have no identity. They don't know who they are. Then you have another problem called anomie, which is the breakdown of all the rules, those social rules and regulations. And you're seeing that wholesale. You've seen that in the United States wholesale in the last 25 years, where all of those things that people just took for granted, the morals and the rules that people took for granted, that's all gone. We don't have to worry about that anymore at all. So you get a breakdown of society where the individual is isolated. He has no community anymore. He has not even any personal identity very much anymore. People begin to identify with what they do. But if what you do is just an industrial job that anybody else could do, turning screws, turning 85 screws an hour, then that doesn't give you any identity. And so we all feel lost. We feel adrift in a world where we have no control. And that's what the loss of community has caused us. So let me go back and just sort of catch y'all up. About 1600, this social trend of centralization of power came along. And so as that social trend passed through time, it began to concentrate power in the central state. And that central state became not a person, but a corporation. And a corporation, as I said, has no body to kick and no soul to damn. So moral questions or questions of compassion and humanity just don't come up for a corporation. Then along comes the Enlightenment that furthers this trend of stripping the individual from out of all of his protective surroundings. Then that comes the Enlightenment, breaking down tradition, professing individualism and promoting individualism over against the community. And then you get the concentration of economic power that comes beginning in the 19th century with the industrial age, and that furthers this process of alienating people and stripping them of personal power. So that's kind of where we got to today. That's the bad news. Y'all want to hear the good news? If you're ready for the good news, here it is. That's all changed. That is changing. In your lifetime and mine, the peak has been hit, and that is changing. And so for the next 300 or 400 years, power will flow away from centers out to peripheries, out to individuals, out to communities, and away from the centers. And if you'll just stop and think a minute about what you've seen just in the last, let's say, 8 years. Just in the last 8 years, as people, do you think, y'all talk to people probably more than I do, because I kind of stay on my farm back on the dirt road. But do you think people have less trust in their government today than they had 8 years ago? Are they more suspicious? Are they more doubtful? Do they doubt more strongly the idea that the government can solve this problem? Are they beginning to think the government might be the cause of the problem? You see this is a social revolution that is taking place now. It is a social revolution. I want you to think back about 50 years. There were several empires in the world 60 years ago. There was the Soviet Empire. There was the British Empire, greatest empire the world's ever seen in its extent. There was the French Empire. There was a Portuguese Empire. There was a Spanish Empire. All that's 60 years ago. Today, there's one. There's one empire that has global hegemony, that has global control. And that empire is the United States. Now, I know that you're saying, well, maybe he's wrong. I mean, if power is becoming more and more concentrated, and so there's only one empire in the world today, doesn't that mean that this trend of centralization is going further and further? No, not at all. It means we're at the peak. It means that you've seen the peak and it's going to go downhill from there. So I know it's hard to believe now, but what I'm telling you is that I think in the last 20 years, this turn in this enormously long-lived social trend of centralization has taken place. And I think, in fact, that you are representatives of that change. It's not, I mean, you can't imagine that 25 years ago, the Tea Party would have happened. And in such a widespread and almost spontaneous fashion. The reason is because this social change was ready to take place. It was already brewing. So, that's my point number 2. The first thing is sphere of concern, sphere of control, not sphere of concern. That's where you need to busy yourself. Second thing is this long period of centralization that has stripped us of freedom and individual dignity and identity.